From your ears to your heart, we bring the light of knowledge to illuminate your life. ilmwaves.com, where we make ilm possible.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala rasulillah. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla, wa anta ya hayyu ya qayyum taj'alul hazna idha shi'ta sahla. I start off by praising Allah, Lord of the worlds, and I humbly ask Him to raise the rank of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and protect his nation from that which he fears for it. Thereafter, brothers and sisters, barakallahu feekum, inshallah ta'ala today we will continue from where we left off, and we were explaining the second hadith. As I recall, we reached the second hadith somewhere along in the middles, and we will continue from there bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So we reached where the part in the hadith where Angel Jibreel said to the Prophet, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِحْسَانِ فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِحْسَانِ. And this means, inform me about ihsan. Inform me about ihsan. And bi'idhnillah, by the will of Allah, we will clarify what ihsan is. Insha'Allah ta'ala. Ihsan is mastering your worship, observing oneself in the rights of Allah, the rights that Allah ta'ala has upon you. You fulfill these rights completely. And there is something called maqamul ihsan also. And it's a level that a person can reach. Right? This is a level in wilayah that a person can reach. It's not prophethood. Prophethood is a level that no one can reach. Meaning that you cannot work towards being a prophet. No matter how many good deeds you do, you say, I want to reach the level of prophethood, it doesn't happen. After the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, there is not a prophet after him. And that's not a level a person can reach. Even if you were living before the time of the Prophet and you were not willed by Allah Ta'ala to be a prophet, you cannot work and say, I want to be a prophet, I want to do this good deed and this good deed, this after the other, until I reach prophethood. It doesn't work like that. You could become a pious Muslim and you can reach the levels of wilayah. Right? Wilayah, you can reach that level. But nubuwwah is not something that a person can work and achieve. This is something that Allah Ta'ala grants to His slaves. Prophethood is something that Allah Ta'ala grants to His slaves, to those slaves that He selected. MashaAllah. So you cannot reach prophethood, but you can reach wilayah. And ihsan is a level in wilayah. It's a very high level actually. MashaAllah. And an example of someone who reached that level of ihsan is no one other than our master Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, one of the great companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the best man after all of the prophets. All of the prophets have a higher rank than Abu Bakr, but after the prophets, Abu Bakr has the highest rank after them. MashaAllah. So Abu Bakr is among those who reached the level of ihsan. May Allah Ta'ala raise his rank. He is among the humans who detached himself from this life completely, and he showed humbleness. He feared Allah and he was brave. He lived this life as he was a stranger. And those who reached this level of ihsan worshipped Allah with their hearts filled with khushu'. Those individuals who reached this level of ihsan, this is how they worship Allah. They always remembering Allah, and when they perform an act of obedience, they have khushu' in their heart and they are aware. And after reaching this level of ihsan, performing the acts of worship becomes pleasure. Subhanallah, it becomes a pleasure. And this is the reason that some of the pious people, you hear that they perform their prayers for such a long period of time. For example, Uthman ibn Affan, he used to recite the entire Quran in one rak'ah, out of his enjoyment in worshipping Allah. And as we mentioned, Abu Bakr is the head of the people of ihsan. Those individuals who reached the level, the maqam of ihsan, Abu Bakr is their head. And there was a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he said to the companions, Man asbaha minkum al-yawma sa'ima. Who from you is fasting today? Qala Abu Bakr ana. Abu Bakr said, I am. The Prophet said, فَمَنْ تَبِعَ مِنْكُمُ الْيَوْمَ جِنَازَةً. And who from you has followed a jinazah? And قال Abu Bakr ana. Abu Bakr said, I did. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, فَمَنْ أَطْعَمَ مِنْكُمُ الْيَوْمَ مِسْكِينًا. And who from you has fed a poor Muslim, a poor person? قال أبو بكر أنا. Abu Bakr said again, I have. The Prophet ﷺ said, فَمَنْ عَادَ مِنْكُمُ الْيَوْمَ مَرِيضًا. And who from you has visited a sick person today? قال Abu Bakr أنا. Abu Bakr said, I have. For the Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَجْتَمَعْنَا فِي امْرِئٍ إِلَّا دَخَلَ الْجَنَّةِ. That the one who does these things will enter paradise. MashaAllah. And we see clearly, brothers and sisters, in this hadith, the love and pleasure and satisfaction that our master Abu Bakr had when he was performing the ibadah, the different types of worship. Right? When the Prophet ﷺ in this hadith, when he addressed the companions and asked them these 4 questions, who did this good deed, and who did this good deed, and who did this good deed, and who did this good deed, the only person to have done all of them was Abu Bakr. May Allah Ta'ala raise his rank. And finding people or an example of an individual who finds this type of pleasure and love and satisfaction in performing the worship and obeying Allah is not strange, brothers and sisters. There are many stories of individuals who, when they worship Allah, they lose themselves. They lose themselves. There's a story of one of the awliya, one of the pious Muslims. He left his house to go pray in the forest. He wanted to pray in the forest. So he went to pray, he said, Allahu Akbar. And when he started his prayer, he stood. He kept standing for a long period of time. For 2 months he remained standing. Imagine that, brothers and sisters. 2 months standing in his prayer. He lost himself. Subhanallah, he really lost himself. They said about him, استغرق في حب الله. He drowned in the love of obeying Allah. Subhanallah. And it was popular in the city that there's this man, and they would go look at him. They would go to the forest where he was praying, and they would look at him, and they would see him not move at all. And he remained like that for 2 months. And there was even a person who he was kind of skeptical about this. He's like, are you sure this person he's not going at nighttime, and he's not eating, he's not returning, maybe he's doing something, maybe he's playing a trick. He was skeptical. So he went and he kept an eye on him for the entire period. He said, I want to see for sure. So he went at nighttime to make sure that he wasn't moving and he wasn't going anywhere. And subhanallah, he found him standing still even at nighttime, and during the day he would not move at all. He lost himself in obeying Allah. And Allah Ta'ala knows best what he saw, this individual, this man. Subhanallah, maybe he saw an angel. Or maybe he saw an angel, because it was mentioned actually in a hadith that the one who prays in an open area, that the angels line up behind him and they follow him in prayer. MashaAllah. So this is a reason why it's good for you to pray in different areas. If you're traveling and and you see an open land, you go, say, I'm going to pray 2 rak'ah sunnahs, Allahu Akbar. And inshaAllah ta'ala, that place that you prayed on will testify for you on the day of judgment. And inshaAllah ta'ala, also you will have angels praying behind you. Who knows, maybe this person, when he said Allahu Akbar, maybe he saw angels lining up behind him and he just lost himself. Who knows? Allah Ta'ala knows best what happened to him. And the maqam of ihsan has an extremely high level and status in the religion. May Allah Ta'ala make us among the people who reach this high status. Ameen. And the scholars of Islam understood what it meant, the maqam of ihsan, and they would make dua for it, and they would ask other people to make dua for it. There was one great scholar of Islam, his name is Shaykh Abdullah al-Harari, and he had some students who went to visit another pious Muslim. So he had students, and these students went to visit a majdub wali. So when they went to this majdub wali, they asked him to make dua. So he made dua for them, and he made dua for Shaykh Abdullah, and he asked Allah Ta'ala to grant Shaykh Abdullah the level of ihsan, the level of the maqam of ihsan. So these students went back to their teacher, to their shaykh, and they told him what this wali made, which dua they made for him, and he began to cry. Right? Shaykh Abdullah, this pious man, began to cry. Why? Because he understood and he comprehended what it meant. This pious Muslim made dua for him, and inshaAllah ta'ala his dua will be accepted, and he made a great dua for him. He asked Allah Ta'ala to grant him the maqam of ihsan. And just having something like this occur from this pious Muslim touched his heart, and he comprehended the meaning, so he started to cry. And a very important part of ihsan is being sincere. A person will not reach the maqam, the level of ihsan, if he is not sincere. in his good deeds, when he stands up in his prayer, when he's doing his siyam, when he donates, when he smiles, when he goes to an Islamic class, for example. These good deeds that a person does, if he is not sincere, if he does not do it for the sake of Allah only, he will never reach the maqam of ihsan. Why? Because he is falling into a sin, a major sin of insincerity. So in order for a person to reach the maqam of ihsan, he has to do many things. First of all, he needs to do the obligations. He has to do the obligations and refrain from the haram. And then on top of that, when he has to have sincerity in his actions. When he is doing his prayer and when he's doing his other acts of obedience, he needs to be sincere. And sincerity is a very difficult thing, except for who Allah Ta'ala willed for it to be easy. The scholars of Islam said, مَا أَخْلَصَ عَبْدٌ لِلَّهِ إِلَّا أَن يَكُونَ فِي جُبٍّ لَا يُعْرَفْ. Subhanallah. And what this means is that a person will not know that he is sincere unless he does something. Right? And over here, this is what it mentions. مَا أَخْلَصَ عَبْدٌ لِلَّهِ إِلَّا أَن يَكُونَ فِي جُبٍّ لَا يُعْرَفْ. That a person will not be sincere until he wishes for himself to be in a well that is unknown. Subhanallah, imagine. So when you wish for yourself to be unknown, to be forgotten to the point that when you do a good deed, nobody knows about it, and this is a comparison to the person who is in a well, down, stuck in a well, and this well, not only do people not see him, but this well is unknown. Nobody knows where it is. And this is how a person should be when he is performing his acts of obedience. He does something, he doesn't want anybody to know about it. He donates, for example, he doesn't want it to be known to the people. When he prays, he doesn't want to be seen as someone who prays. He doesn't care about what the people think. He only cares about his acts of obedience, that he is performing it correctly and that it's being accepted to Allah. May Allah Ta'ala make us among the sincere people. And removing insincerity is a very difficult thing. Subhanallah. An individual, he might perform an act of obedience and he will not know that he is insincere. The scholars of Islam compared insincerity to the marching of ants. Subhanallah. Now I'm not sure if any of you have ants in their homes, infestation, but it doesn't start off all hundred thousands of ants all at once. How does it start off usually? One ant, a small ant that you cannot see. It comes into the house, goes from the door all the way to the kitchen, comes back, calls other ants, and they begin to increase and increase and increase, and then all of a sudden you have an infestation. And this is what the scholars of Islam compared insincerity to the marching of ants. You do a good deed and you think you're sincere, but you are not sincere. So you keep doing it, you keep doing it until all of a sudden you realize that all the acts of obedience that you thought you were doing correctly, that you were doing sincerely, have not been for the sake of Allah, and it's been wasted. Subhanallah. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. And the scholar Ibn Ata'illah as-Sakandari, he gave an advice about being sincere, and he said this in his book Al-Hikamul Ata'iyya. He said, idfin wujudaka fi ardil khumul. Subhanallah. And this means bury yourself in a place that no one wants to be. What does he mean by that? He means that when you perform your acts of obedience, you should not want anybody to know about it. This is how a person should be. As if he is burying himself in a place that nobody knows about. This is what he's saying. Idfin wujudaka fi ardil khumul. Bury yourself in a place that nobody knows. It's unknown to everybody. Right? This is how a person should be, subhanallah, because of course being insincere harms an individual. Popularity and many times destroys a person. May Allah Ta'ala protect us from insincerity. And the scholars of Islam also mentioned the example of the sincere person and the insincere person. Alright, there's a comparison, a very beautiful comparative analogy where they compare the sincere person and the insincere person. So they compare the sincere person to a seed that is buried and the insincere person to a seed that is not buried. MashaAllah. Now the seed that is not buried, it can sprout, but it will take a lot longer, subhanallah. It's also weaker and it's prone to being pushed by the wind. Whereas the seed that is buried grows stronger, it's faster, and it's not pushed around by the wind. And now you look at yourself also, when you want to plant a seed or a flower or something, do you just throw it on the dirt and leave it, or do you bury it? You bury it. Why? Because you know that if it's buried under the turab, under the dirt, it's better for it and it's stronger. And this is sincerity, brothers and sisters. Sincerity is like the seed that is buried under the dirt, because eventually it's going to grow. So eventually the good deed that you perform sincerely for the sake of Allah, you will benefit from it in the hereafter, just as you benefit from the seed that you plant later on. May Allah Ta'ala make us among the sincere people. Subhanallah, the insincere person is muflis, is bankrupt. That's what muflis means. It means bankrupt. Because look at him, subhanallah. Imagine a person in this life, he works hard, he builds a business, and all of a sudden, he's bankrupt. He loses all of his money. He has nothing left. Imagine something like that happening in the Day of Judgment, in the hereafter. A person, he works so hard, he recognizes the good deeds, he knows about Islam, but he was insincere. So when he donated, he was insincere. When he prayed, he was insincere. When he fasted, when he paid, when he donated, he was insincere. All of these good deeds that he did, he thinks he's getting reward for it. But in actuality, he was insincere. So what happens on the Day of Judgment? He has nothing. Similar to the person who's bankrupt in this life. When he has nothing from his wealth, all of it is gone. Subhanallah. And there's actually a hadith about this, that on the Day of Judgment, a person will be brought and he will be asked, what did you do? And he will say, I taught for the sake of Allah. It will be said to him, no, you lied. And then he will be thrown into hellfire until his brain flows. Subhanallah. Then another person will be brought and he will be asked, what did you do? He will say, I fought for the sake of Allah. And it will be said to him, no, you lied. Subhanallah. You fought to be considered courageous. And then he will be thrown into hellfire. Subhanallah. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. And going back to the hadith, you'll notice that Angel Jibreel, when he asked him about ihsan, when he asked the Prophet about ihsan, the Prophet ﷺ, he replied, أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ, to worship Allah as if you see Him. As if you see Him. There are people out there, brothers and sisters, from the pious people, from the God-fearing slaves of Allah, who conduct themselves when they are alone the same way they conduct themselves when they are in public. Meaning that they fear Allah when they are alone, and when they are in public, they fear Allah. They are not acting, they're not putting an image, they're not trying to imitate or trick anybody. They fear Allah whether they are by themselves or whether they are in public. And there's a story of a man who once entered a garden and he needed to pray. And this man could not find any water to make his prayer. So what did he do? He made tayammum. But then he realized that he didn't ask permission of the landowner. He didn't ask permission from the landowner. So and he couldn't find him either. So for 40 years he would cry over this, brothers and sisters. For 40 years he would cry over this. And his mom would ask him and say, what is wrong with you? Did you kill somebody? Like what is causing you to cry this type of to shed these types of tears? Subhanallah. These are the pious people, those who fear Allah. And this is a perfect example of wara. And there was also a pious man who used to cry a lot out of fear of Allah. And the people around him used to be surprised and perplexed, and they would ask him, like, why are you crying so much? What is making you so sad? And then he replied to them, وَكَيْفَ تَنَامُ الْعَيْنُ وَهِيَ قَرِيرَةٌ وَلَمْ تَدْرِ فِي أَيِّ الْمَحَلَّيْنِ تَنْزِلُ, which means, and how can the person go to sleep comfortably? How can he go to sleep relaxed, and he does not know where he is going to end up? Is he going to be in hellfire, or is he going to be in paradise? So if this is the situation of the insan, of the human, how can he go to sleep relaxed? How can he not shed tears if this is his situation? May Allah Ta'ala make us among the pious people. Subhanallah. And also Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, his lips never used to be dry from saying these words. He would always say, وَلَا خَيْرَ فِي عَيْشِ امْرِئٍ إِذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي دَارِ الْقَرَارِ نَصِيبُ. And this means that there is no goodness in the life for the person if he does not have anything from Allah in the hereafter. If this individual lives this life in his dunya and he has all the pleasures, he has all the luxuries, he's living a comfortable life, but at the same time he has not prepared anything for the hereafter. This individual, la khayra fi aishihi, that he has no goodness in his life. Why? Because this life is temporary. And you will not take anything from the luxuries of this life to the next life. The only thing you take is your deeds. So if this individual lives his whole life not worshipping Allah, not doing any of the good deeds, what goodness does he really have in the hereafter? What goodness is he going to acquire? And there's also the story of Sahal at-Tusturi, who is among the pious, God-fearing slaves of Allah. What happened to him was that he woke up at night when he was a child and he saw his uncle performing ibadah. And his uncle was also among the God-fearing slaves of Allah. So his uncle wanted to benefit Sahal because he knew that he was a child and he knew that he would absorb anything that he taught him. So he called Sahal over and he taught him a few words. He taught him to say, Allah sees me, Allah sees me, Allah sees me. So he told Sahal to keep repeating this and he let him go. On another occasion, Sahal woke up at night, he saw his uncle, and his uncle taught him some other words to say. His uncle taught him to say, Allah knows about me, Allah knows about me, Allah knows about me. So Sahal would go and he would keep repeating these words. So then on another occasion, he saw his uncle again and his uncle taught him to say another set of words. He taught him to say, Allah hears me, Allah hears me, Allah hears me. So Sahal would go and he would keep repeating this. And remember that he was a child. So on that occasion, his uncle told him, Ya Sahal, if a person knows that Allah sees him and that Allah hears about him and that Allah knows about him, how can he disobey him? And these words entered Sahal's heart, mashallah. He really took it in and he benefited from it. And he was a gifted child. He was, mashallah, he was special. And his teacher noticed this about him also. And he would pay more attention to Sahal. Right? His teacher, his Islamic teacher, would pay more attention to Sahal than the other children. So what happened was that the parents of the other children, they realized and they noticed that the sheikh, this teacher, was paying more attention to Sahal and he wasn't paying as much attention to their children. So they asked him, why are you paying more attention to Sahal and not paying attention to our children as you are for Sahal? So his teacher said, I will show you. So he brought all of the children and he gave each one a chicken and he said, go to a place that you will not be seen and slaughter this chicken. Go to a place that you will not be seen and slaughter this chicken. So all of the children took their chickens, they went to a place by themselves, they thought no one could see them, and they came back with the chickens slaughtered, their heads cut off. Except who? Sahal. Sahal came back with his chicken alive and he was crying. He was crying, subhanallah. And then when his teacher asked him, why didn't you slaughter this chicken? Sahal told him, I could not find a place that Allah Ta'ala doesn't see me. Subhanallah. And then his teacher said, غَلَبَتْ عَلَيْهِ رُؤْيَةُ اللَّهِ وَغَلَبَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ رُؤْيَةُ الْخَلْقِ. That Sahal, the first thing that comes to his mind is that Allah sees him. As for the other children, the first thing that comes to their mind is that people see them. Subhanallah. May Allah Ta'ala make us like this pious man. And know that Allah Ta'ala is not seen in this life. The Prophet ﷺ, he did not see Allah during the Mi'raj with his eyes. He saw Allah with his heart. Not in his heart, but with his heart. And it is obligatory to believe that the Muslims will see Allah in the hereafter while in paradise. They will see Him without Allah being in a place or direction. And they will have no doubt that what they are seeing is their Lord, just as the one who sees the moon on a full night does not doubt that what he is seeing is the moon. Alright, so this is not resembling Allah to the moon, of course not. Hasha. This is drawing similarity to the lack of doubt that one would have when they see Allah. Okay? Just as when you see the moon, you know that what you are seeing is definitely the moon. Right? When you see and you look at the full moon, you don't think that this is a headlight coming from a car or from a street lamp. You know that this is the moon and there's no doubt. Likewise, when the believers see their Lord, they will not have any doubt that they are seeing Allah. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a hadith, إِنَّكُمْ سَتَرَوْنَ رَبَّكُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ كَمَا تَرَوْنَ الْقَمَرَ لَيْلَةَ الْبَدْرِ لَا تَضَامُّونَ فِي رُؤْيَتِهِ. And this hadith means you will see your Lord on the day of judgment just as the person looks at the moon when it is full. You will not gather together to look at him. And this is a hadith that was narrated by Muslim. And it's also important to mention that the latter part of this hadith also stands as proof that Allah exists without a place. Right? Because you'll notice in the hadith the Prophet said, you will not gather together to look at him. Right? If Allah Ta'ala existed in a place, the people would have to gather in a place together to see Him. But because Allah Ta'ala, He exists without a place, He does not have an up, He doesn't have a down, no left, no right, no forward, no backward. He exists without a place. Because of this, the Muslims will see Allah and they will not have to gather together to see Him. Because had He existed in a place, people would have to gather to see Him. But because Allah Ta'ala doesn't, because Allah Ta'ala exists without a place, this is not going to happen. And there are some people, subhanallah, who misunderstand this hadith, and subsequently, due to their misunderstanding and to their lack of knowledge, they liken Allah to the creation. Because you notice in the hadith, it said that you will see Allah on the Day of Judgment just as the person looks at the moon when it is full. So they read this hadith and they think that Allah Ta'ala resembles the moon. Hasha, a'udhu billah. Allah Ta'ala does not resemble His creation in any way whatsoever. So they think that Allah Ta'ala is like the moon, meaning that He has shape, that He is a body. They think that Allah Ta'ala has light emanating from Him, just as the moon has light emanating from it. And this is what they understand from the hadith. So they liken Allah to the creation. They say that Allah Ta'ala resembles the moon. Subhanallah. Now of course this is not correct, because from the fundamental belief of Muslims all over the world is that Allah Ta'ala, the Exalted, does not resemble His creation in any way whatsoever. Subhanallah. And just as we mentioned earlier, the comparison in that hadith is in respect to the lack of doubt. Right? The comparison is to the lack of doubt that an individual will have when he sees Allah. And comparing that to the lack of doubt when an individual sees the moon. Like we mentioned earlier, that when you see the full moon on a clear night, you have no doubt that what you are seeing is the moon. You do not think that this is a flashlight, or that it's a car, or it's a headlight, or some light coming from an apartment building. You don't think that. You know that this is the moon, and you don't have any doubt. If somebody comes to you and says that this is not the moon, this light is not from the full moon, you're gonna look at him strangely. So likewise, just as you have no doubt that you are looking at the moon, you will have no doubt that you are looking to your Lord on the Day of Judgment. And this is the meaning of the hadith. And then in the hadith, Angel Jibreel, who was in the shape of a man, he asked the Prophet ﷺ to inform him about the occurrence of the Day of Judgment. When is the Day of Judgment going to occur? And the Prophet replied, and he informed him that he did not know. And this is among the things that Allah Ta'ala knows exclusively, when the Day of Judgment is going to occur. So then Angel Jibreel asked him to inform him, to tell him some of the signs of the Day of Judgment. And the Prophet ﷺ, he answered him and he told him some of the signs. And I'm going to mention some of those signs, but before that I'll mention some of the signs of the Day of Judgment. And these were not mentioned in the hadith, but beneficial to know. Among these signs, and all of the following have already occurred, subhanallah. Among these signs are earthquakes. You will have numerous earthquakes. Also, diseases will be widespread. Diseases that were not known to the people before will emerge. And also you will have many preachers of misguidance. And many people will have claimed prophethood, and this also has occurred. And also the change of weather. Subhanallah. Summer will feel like winter, and winter is going to feel like summer. And also ignorance is going to be widespread. Ignorance in the religion is going to be widespread, and this is clearly evident in our era, subhanallah. And there's going to be a lot of unjust killing, to the point that the person killing is not going to know why he is killing, and the person who is being killed doesn't know why he is being killed, subhanallah. And this is also clearly occurring, and has occurred. Also among the signs is that time is going to pass by quickly, subhanallah. And also the marketplaces will be large and widespread, and they will be connected. And we can see this in many countries. You go and you're traveling on the street, and it seems like everywhere you go there's a marketplace, and it's connected, subhanallah. So this is among the signs of the Day of Judgment, subhanallah. And also among the signs is that the different nations are going to gather on the nation of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like the way people gather around a plate of food ready to eat it. So this is also clearly occurring. You look at the Muslim nation, the Ummah, the different Muslim Islamic countries, and how they're being torn apart, subhanallah, by different countries. May Allah Ta'ala relieve the Muslims of their plight and their difficulties. So these are a few of the signs of the Day of Judgment that are beneficial to know. And among the signs that were actually mentioned in this hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ answered him, he said, أَن تَلِدَ الْأَمَةُ رَبَّتَهَا, to witness the slave woman give birth to her female owner. Now there are many different interpretations for this. What does it mean? Among the interpretations, some scholars said that what is meant by this part of the hadith is that a lot of disobedience will occur from the children towards their parents. And this is among the sins of the body, subhanallah. So the scholars of Islam explain this part of the hadith to say that many people, many children are going to disobey their parents and going to harm their parents. Now how is that going to occur? And what's the relationship in this hadith? You'll notice that the Prophet said that the slave woman will give birth to her female owner. Meaning, and the scholars of Islam explain this, that a female is going to give birth to her child, and this child is going to disobey her and harm her and treat her in a disrespectful manner, just as an owner usually treats his slave. Now of course this is not the state of every owner, but most owners, when they have a servant or a slave, they treat them inappropriately. So this is what's going to happen. You're going to have a woman give birth to her child, and this child is not going to appreciate their mother, or his mother, or her mother, and he's going to actually treat her wrongly and disrespectfully in a harmful manner, just as an owner treats his slave in a harmful and disrespectful manner. So this is what the scholars of Islam explained. And also among the signs of the Day of Judgment that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned specifically in this hadith, he said, وَأَن تَرَى الْحُفَاةَ الْعُرَاةَ الْعَالَةَ رِعَاءَ الشَّاءِ يَتَطَاوَلُونَ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ. And the barefoot, unclothed, impoverished shepherds will race to build high-rise buildings. Subhanallah. Okay, and back in the day, if you know, there were people who would raise camels, and there were people who would raise shepherds. Those who used to raise camels were considered to be among the upper class, and those who raised shepherds were considered to be among the lower class. And you will notice that the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned those who raised shepherds. So he mentioned the shepherds, those who were in the lower class among the Bedouins. So among the signs is that we will reach a point at which those who were uneducated in the field of building high-rise buildings will race with each other, and they will do so in an alarming rate. Subhanallah. As we can see today, this is occurring in the Emirates, in Dubai, for example. You know, these people, they used to be shepherds a couple of years ago. They were shepherds. Now they're racing to build the biggest buildings in the world. Subhanallah. And then Umar in the hadith said, فَلَبِثْنَا مَلِيًّا. So this person who asked these questions, he left, and then we stayed for a lengthy period of time. And the scholars of Islam said approximately 3 days. Right? Some of the scholars gave a specific date. They said 3 days passed by, and then the Prophet ﷺ, he asked those companions, he said, do you know who came to you, who this man was who asked me these questions? And they said, Allah and his messenger know best. And then he said, فَإِنَّهُ Jibreel. He is Jibreel. He came to teach you the matters of your religion. So inshallah we will end it here for today. I ask Allah Ta'ala to make us benefit from what we learned and to make us implement what we learned. Inshallah Ta'ala, the Exalted, we will continue this series 40 Hadith and Nawawiyy next week bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah Ta'ala protect you and your families and grant us paradise without any previous torture. Ameen. Subhanaka rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you liked it, check out the rest of our series. And donate for the sake of Allah so that we may continue spreading the obligatory knowledge to Muslims all over the world. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah accept your deeds.